Early human history is divided into periods based on technology and lifestyle. From stone tools to farming, copper, bronze, and iron, each stage shows important human progress.
Section 8. The Neolithic Revolution. Transition to food production. Now we arrive at one of the greatest changes in history. As hunter-gatherers spent generations observing nature, they gradually became familiar with the seasons and with different food resources. Slowly, this knowledge led them to a food-producing way of life, and this gradual shift is what we call the Neolithic Revolution. Humans were finally learning to make food, not just find it. Domestication. The hallmark, the defining feature of this revolution was domestication. This means humans brought selected animals and plants under their control, and over time, even developed new breeds through careful cultivation and animal husbandry. So instead of chasing wild animals and searching for wild plants, humans began to raise and grow exactly what they needed. This was a total change in the human relationship with nature. New tools and pottery. Notice a clever difference here, children. Hunter-gatherers made tools to get food, like spears and arrows. But Neolithic farmers made tools to produce and process food, like grinding stones. They also developed earthenware pottery in many shapes and sizes for storing and cooking food. So the very purpose of their tools changed, from getting food to growing and preparing it. First villages. Because farmers had to stay near their fields, they established the first village settlements, and these humble villages were hugely important. They laid the foundation for the later urban revolution, that is, the rise of cities. So the first village was really the seed from which future towns and civilizations would grow. Figure 4.14, a gradual, uneven shift. Look at this chart carefully. It shows that the shift to farming did not happen at the same time everywhere in the world. In different regions, it began at different periods. This is an important idea. History does not move like a single clock for all humanity. Different peoples reached the same milestone at different times. Think about it, the chart. The textbook now asks you to observe the chart and identify the animals that were domesticated and the kinds of habitats and objects that were used. Then ask yourself an interesting question. Are any of these still used today? You will be surprised how many things from the Neolithic, like pottery, cattle, and cultivated grains, are still part of our lives. Regions in the chart. The chart shows farming appearing in several regions, each with its own crop. West Africa, pearl millet; West Asia, wheat and barley; India, millets; the India-Ganga Plains, rice; North China, millets; and South China, rice. So notice, different regions domesticated different crops depending on their soil and climate. Farming was a worldwide idea, but with a local flavor everywhere. Section 9. Neolithic period in the Indian subcontinent. Regional variation. Now let us look at our own subcontinent during the Neolithic. Here we find regional variation, which means agriculture began at different times in different areas. There was no single starting point for the whole land. So farming spread unevenly, region by region, just as it did in the rest of the world. Mehrgarh, oldest Neolithic site. The single most important name to remember here is Mehrgarh, on the Bolan River in present-day Pakistan. It is the oldest Neolithic site in the subcontinent and also the earliest agricultural village, dating back to about 7,000 BCE. So Mehrgarh is where organized farming life in our region truly begins, a name you must never forget. Life at Mehrgarh. What was life like at Mehrgarh? The people built sun-dried brick houses and granaries, stores for grain, and they buried their dead in graves. They also made a variety of ornaments from semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli and carnelian, and from shells. So even 9,000 years ago, people had settled homes, stored food, and loved beautiful jewelry. Quite a developed life.
Mehrgarh was one of the earliest farming villages in the Indian subcontinent. People grew wheat and barley, raised animals, built brick houses, and made beautiful ornaments.
Crops and animals at Mehrgarh. At Mehrgarh, people cultivated wheat and barley, and raised sheep, goats, and Indian cattle. And one animal was especially important, the zebu, the humped bull, which you still see across India today. So the farming and herding tradition of India has roots that run all the way back to Mehrgarh. First copper, Chalcolithic. Here is a big achievement. The people of Mehrgarh were among the first to make copper objects, which means they entered the Metal Age. Because they used copper along with stone, they became known as the Chalcolithic people by about 4000 BCE. So Mehrgarh is not only about farming, it is also where India steps into the Age of Metal. Basis for the Bronze Age. And why does all this matter so much? Because this copper-working, farming way of life laid the very basis for the great Bronze Age Sindhu-Sarasvati civilization around 3500 BCE. So Mehrgarh is like a stepping stone. From a humble village, the path leads straight to one of the world's first great civilizations. Spread by 2500 BCE. By about 2500 BCE, most of the Indian subcontinent was occupied by Neolithic farming communities. Their way of life was defined by herding cattle, sheep, and goats, and cultivating cereals, millets, and pulses. So by this time, the farming revolution had spread far and wide across our land. Sanganakalu. One good South Indian example is Sanganakalu, a Neolithic site built on top of a granite hill, dating to around 2000 BCE. It reminds us that the Neolithic way of life was not limited to the Northwest. It flourished in the South, too. So keep Sanganakalu in mind as a southern Neolithic settlement. Section 10. Sindhu-Sarasvati Civilization. From Neolithic to Civilization. Now watch how a village grows into a civilization. The Neolithic way of life that began at Mehrgarh gradually spread across the middle and upper Indus Valley and further east. These humble farming routes slowly, over thousands of years, grew into the mighty Sindhu-Sarasvati civilization. So civilization did not appear out of nowhere. It grew from the Neolithic soil. Copper extraction, approximately 4000 BCE. Some of these settlements mastered the extraction of copper from its ores around 4000 BCE. In doing so, they became the earliest Chalcolithic sites in the subcontinent, and this marked the beginning of the Bronze Age here. So learning to draw metal out of rock was a key technological leap on the road to civilization. Copper tools boost productivity. When copper tools were introduced into the fertile alluvial plains of the Indus and the Ghaggar-Sarasvati rivers, farming became much more productive. And more production meant greater prosperity for these communities. So better tools, more food and goods, richer, stronger societies. This chain of cause and effect keeps repeating in history. Large-scale pottery. This was also a time of large-scale pottery production, showing diverse regional styles. Different regions made pottery with their own distinctive shapes and painted designs. So pottery is not just about pots, it helps archaeologists tell one region and one period apart from another, like a fingerprint of culture. The pre-Harappan phase. Some scientific, radiocarbon dates suggest that at sites like Birana and Kunal, along the dried bed of the Sarasvati River, the pre-Harappan phase began very early, between about 7,000 and 5,500 BCE. So the roots of this civilization reach back astonishingly far, showing a long, slow buildup over thousands of years.
Harappians were skilled farmers and engineers. Kalibath shows plowed fields, while Dolaviti and Londa reveal advanced water harvesting, storage, drainage, and dockyard construction.
The early Harappan stage. Because these sites show cultural continuity, an unbroken flow of traditions, this stage is called the early Harappan. We can see the continuity in their pottery traditions, semi-precious stone beads, shell bangles, terracotta objects, and copper working. So the early Harappan is like the childhood of the great civilization that was to come. Beginnings of towns and script. And here is a key point. Some of the most important features of the later civilization, building a perimeter wall around the settlement, the use of seals, and even the Harappan script, probably had their beginnings in this early Harappan stage. So the seeds of city life and writing were already being sown early on. Harappan crafts. Remember, the Harappans were not merely farmers. They also practiced many arts and crafts, and pottery was one of the major crafts that boosted their economy. Different regions produced pottery in unique shapes with beautiful painted designs. So the Harappan economy stood on two legs: agriculture and craft production. Early bead production. Among their crafts, bead making was very important. Evidence of early Harappan bead production has been found at Harappa in Pakistan, Kunal in Haryana, and Datrana in Gujarat. Along with beads, their copperwork and shellwork also developed gradually. So the Harappans were skilled artisans, not just tillers of the soil. Graffiti and early seals. Here is a fascinating clue. At early sites like Harappa, Ramandheri, and Kunal, we find graffiti on pottery and a few seals with simple geometric and animal designs. Scholars believe these could be the forerunners, the early ancestors, of the later Harappan script and inscribed seals. So writing did not appear suddenly. It grew slowly out of these simple marks. Figure 4.18, Harappan timeline. Study this timeline carefully because it ties everything together. Neolithic, 7,000 BCE, Chalcolithic, 4,500 BCE, Bronze Age, 3,300 BCE, Early Harappan, Mature Harappan, around 2,600 BCE, Late Harappan, down to about 1,300 to 1,000 BCE. So the civilization had a long build-up, a glorious peak, and a slow decline, a full life cycle you can trace on this one chart. Don't miss out. Kalibangan plowed field. Here is a delightful fact. At Kalibangan, The early Harappans left behind a plowed field with crisscrossing horizontal and vertical furrows. This shows they practiced double crop cultivation, growing 2 crops in the same field, exactly like our Rabi and Kharif seasons today. So this is a farming tradition nearly 5,000 years old that we still follow. Isn't that amazing? Think about it. Weights and measures. The Harappans even had their own standard system of weights and measurements, a sure sign of a well-organized society and careful trade. They used binary multiples, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on, for small weights, and multiples of 10 for larger ones. So the book asks you to imagine, how would long-distance trade have suffered if everyone used different weights? This helps you appreciate why standard measures are so important.
Harappians were skilled farmers and engineers. Kalibath shows plowed fields, while Dolaviti and Londa reveal advanced water harvesting, storage, drainage, and dockyard construction. Mehrgarh was one of the earliest farming villages in the Indian subcontinent. People grew wheat and barley, raised animals, built brick houses, and made beautiful ornaments.
Class 9 and 10 students, don't worry, make science and social science easy with your CBSE teacher. Subscribe now, like, comment, and press the bell.